welcome everybody to the October 20th, 2025 special board meeting. Tonight we have a single item on the agenda, but first let's call roll.
Becker,
Here.
McCoy, here. Lyerly,
Here.
Gerlach,
Here.
Minnow,
Here.
Knell,
Here.
Meister, here.
All right, all board members are present and accounted for. Jeanette is joining us virtually. So we also have at the table with us tonight two individuals from our partner organization, CISA 7. I invite you to introduce yourself.
Aaron Melcheski, Agency Administrator here at CISA 7.
And Jeff Walters, Executive Director at CISA 7.
Gentlemen, welcome. This is a very interesting and exciting day for us. This is kind of the kickoff for the superintendent search. So CISA 7 has provided the board an agenda for this evening. So I'm going to turn over the chair to CISA 7 and I'll become a participant until they tell me otherwise. So Aaron?
Thank you. Some big shoes to fill here, James. So we'll kick it back and forth. So great to see everybody again tonight. So you have the resources for tonight for me in two different ways. So I sent you that email midweek last week, had all the hyperlinks to the various documents that we're going to refer to throughout our evening, as well as in the folders that are each of your seats. Just to walk through the folder real quick, because there might be some items you'd prefer to see in print rather than online. On the left-hand side, we have our agenda for this evening to walk through the items. Behind that is the detailed timeline that lists all our activities for the session, for the search. And behind that would be what I call an at-a-glance timeline. On the right-hand side, you're going to find the drafted job posting for the position. Behind that, you'll see the sample survey questions that we'll get into and spend some time with tonight. Behind that would be the focus group process and questions we'll take a look at. And then the final two items on the right-hand side would be the first and second round interview structures that we'll begin our conversations on and continue to refine as we go throughout our process. So if I'm going to hit up and just start with that first agenda item on our agenda for tonight is going to be that search timeline. That spreadsheet version, the legal on legal paper, is really an outline for the full process beginning to end. Through earlier conversations with President Lyerly, we identified that February 24, 25, and 26 would be the target round for the first interviews, and that March 4, 5, and 6 would be the target for the second round of interviews. Just basically looking at calendar and some desires that we want to get into as far as our pacing is concerned. So based on that, I worked backwards to essentially build the rest of the timeline in place here. You're going to see there's opportunities for both open working sessions, but there's going to be a number of closed sessions we'll need to get into when we're dealing in terms of interview questions and when we start digging into some of our candidate profiles, pre-screening, things like that. So I identify those right on both the at a glance and the full detail list for our process there. So as we take a moment to pause, I want to see if there's any questions in terms of either the full detailed calendar or the at a glance calendar, either dates or as if you had a little time to look through it, the process itself.
I don't have a question, but board members, we need to lock a schedule in as quickly as possible. So if you know of any conflicts, we have this week, if you can communicate those to us. Otherwise, please put save the dates on calendars so that we can, proceed with confidence. Yeah, Laura?
So I spoke with James yesterday and expressed something to him, and I'm going to just share this with everybody else. The last time we went through this process, we got to the end and got our finalists. And at the time, I think I wished, and maybe some other people, that we had enough time to do another with just the finalists, to spend more time with them. And I don't know, James was honest. He's like, I don't know where we find room for that. And maybe there isn't, but I want to just express that at the beginning, that when we get to the end and we have those finalists, I would like to just hope that we can, if needed, spend a little bit more time with them. We might not.
Oops, sorry, still go right ahead.
No, we might not need to. I just want to make sure that if we need to, we can. And I'll leave that to you to kind of, it's pretty packed.
In the space I would see to do that would be following that second round, the 4, 5, and 6. We have a small gap of window. Ultimately, before we get to the March 23rd would be that next board meeting you guys would have, that the aim is to approve the contract during that session. So we would have a little window in there if we wanted to get another activity or event in there in between the March 4, 5, 6 and March 23rd.
Well, and also there's some,
Your mic, Jeanette can't hear you. Your mic's not on. Oh, it is.
yeah, my
Oh,
light,
okay.
yeah. There's some uncertainty too as to whether or not the candidates would be available in that tiny window. You know, they might not be able to do it. I'm just, like I said, stating it at the beginning of the process, because
Sorry.
that was something the last time around that I think we might have benefited from. That's all.
Did you, Alex?
Sorry to mess with your mic. I didn't mean to do that. I would just quickly second what she says. I think I'd like to, as much as possible, pencil in the plan to do that, because I think there's plenty of reasons to think that there's only good to be gained from getting an extra look. Again, this is a really, really, really important decision for our district considering the last number of years. So I think penciling that in as much as possible also would increase the likelihood of any potential candidate being able to possibly be more available for that. So I'm a huge fan of that idea, definitely.
So as we go through this evening, I will call out Laura, to your point, differences in this approach than when we compare it to the last time we did this. And we also have a day in the district, is that final day. And I would look first to potentially rearrange that day in the district for more board time, because I agree with you. Last time they were with a lot of different stakeholders and then we had a dinner, right? And that didn't necessarily feel comfortable. So we have some potential latitude in how we schedule that day. It is kind of arduous to bring them back in for another visit, depending on where they're from, right? If they're local, much easier than if they have to fly in. Okay, let's continue.
And to all of those points too, what I would look to do is take that back in and I can keep refining our to-do list. Because one thing that we're making very evident on the job posting is all the important dates. So it's one of those pieces that if the candidates are serious and true to the position, they're going to reserve those dates well ahead of time. So we're communicating that out well ahead of time. So if there's interest in penciling in whether we, refine March 4, 5, 6 and or add an event the week of the 9th, later on that week, we could certainly look at doing each of those different things to make sure we can get to Laura's point and having our Laura and Alex's point of securing that extra time.
I would even be open to using time on the weekend. I don't know if that's an option for everyone else, but I'm just, again, putting it out there.
Right. Okay, let's continue.
Yep, sure thing. Any other additional comments, questions on either the full calendar or the schedule at a glance?
Go ahead.
Ample wait time. I will move forward then. So the next, I'm going to take our focus then to the job posting that is on the front right cover, or also linked in your agendas for tonight. So with this, I spent some good time with Mr. Freeze and Ms. Blakesley to really kind of fine tune that job posting. And in that posting, we had a couple goals. We wanted to make sure that we highlighted both the district, all the neat things and cool things you guys have going on as a district, as well as the city of Green Bay. So you're going to see some of those things articulated through in that job posting, hopefully trying to showcase some of the positive things you guys have going on in your communities here. One thing to note is it's a job posting, not the job description. There's two separate things that are living with that, right? So you all will go through, review, or we'll do again soon, the job description that details and outlines the evaluative properties of the position itself. This is the posting in which we're looking to entice folks to apply for the district in that position. So I just want to make sure there was clarity between the differences with that. I'm not looking to refurbish your job description for that by any means.
Are we still on this?
Yep.
Okay, just for the board, this is a draft, right? And nothing tonight should be evaluated as kind of completed work. So as a starting position, we'll have this, then we'll walk through how we're going to structure our community and staff engagement, get that feedback. We will revisit this before the posting goes live. So if we have an opportunity to make any changes based on that feedback, we'll do that.
Yep, absolutely. We can come back and actually we touch upon this in several items at the November 24th meeting that I show on my list here. So another thing to note, when I met with Mr. Freeze and Ms. Blakesley, when we were looking at the core responsibilities, what we did is made some intentional purpose to articulate that back to the district's strategic plan. So when you look at the core responsibilities of the position, is to really to be that chief executive officer who is bringing that plan into practice, as well as it calls out the portrait of a graduate. Some two important pieces of work I think you folks have worked on in the last several months. And so when you look at those core responsibilities, it really points back to those items on there. As President Lyerly mentioned, open to any questions or feedback, and we can make those adjustments and certainly bring this document back to our an upcoming meeting that we have. Questions, comments on the job posting?
All right. I think we're good.
Moving on. We'll keep moving on. So another thing, just to just to note, nothing, no action to take, but just want to let you know too, communicated with the district's legal counsel to review the superintendent contract, just to make sure it had some fresh eyes and it was vetted again by your attorney. So when we get to the point of signing the contract and putting information into it, it's going to be vetted. You guys have had clarity on it and you feel confident about moving forward with that document. So that's something that's underway as we speak as well. So the next topic,
Mike,
I
just a second.
Yep.
Is there any questions about that? Okay.
Thank you, James. The next topic I anticipate spending a little bit of time on, and that's the survey. So we in your document and in your online agenda, I linked a document that has an aggregate of various survey questions. Again, these are all drafts, so this isn't a final version, a place for us to start the conversation and refine our work as we get to the survey process. So this document is an aggregate, meaning it has all the questions for all different groups in there. And next to each question, in parentheses there, you can see that it identifies what the target audience would be with that question. So some are for everybody, some might just be for your community members, and that would also include your student section within that. And some questions might just be for staff, just because of the context and structure of the question. So that's what you see noted within that document there.
All right, Lynn?
So are you saying that there are going to be individual separate surveys? And so if I'm on the staff, I will get the staff survey and okay, so they're not all going to be lumped together like this eventually. Okay.
That's correct. We would have at least two surveys based on the makeup that we have right here. So staff would have one, and on that staff would identify, you can see in there, are they high school, middle school, are they administration, are they teacher, are they support staff, so on and so forth. And then the community one goes through, are they community member, with student, without student, how long they've been a community member, student, so on and so forth. That's a great question, Lynn. Thanks for clarifying that.
Laura?
I don't know where this would go, and I don't know how the rest of you feel about it, but in past surveys, about a variety of things, we often see a really strong representation from grandparents. And I wonder if there's a place where we could add grandparent. They really show up in our surveys often, in a very strong way.
Jeanette?
Yeah, I like that idea. I thought about that too, Laura. That wasn't my question though. So in some of the sections, it says 3 questions by priority. So are you going to have a place for them to put 1, 2, 3, or they're just going to check 3 of their top?
Great question. There'll actually be 3 separate questions lined up with that individual question. So it'll be 1, 2, 3 stacked all in a row. So they're identifying one of those key properties so they can identify their full top three. And we're going to spend a little bit more time on that too as we move forward within our discussion. But great question.
Laura,
Just expanding a little bit on categories. Do we have something that says guardian? Okay,
so can we just expand on parent or guardian of
that,
current
yeah,
student?
whatever, but,
Yeah.
but not everyone, not every kid has a parent and there might just, there's other categories.
Yep, we can certainly make that adjustment. Any other questions? Okay, so first let's talk about the process for discussing this agenda item. What I would like to do is take a look at this and these questions really in 3 different passes. So first, take a look at it and seek your feedback. And if there's any questions that you're looking to remove outright, like, hey, there's no relevance to this, we can just get rid of this one altogether. So we'll start with that as a first topic. On a second pass, I'll seek your feedback as far as the target audience for each question. So if you saw a question that said, hey, that would be better suited for X or Y instead of X or Y, I'll look for your feedback on that one. And on the final pass, I'll seek your feedback for on each individual question. So for example, if you're interested in narrowing down options of the different characteristics that are listed there, because some of them have up to like 7 or 8 different characteristics. And that was based on some feedback James and Lynn and I had a chance to kind of talk about that, and we'll continue to talk about that. So, but I just want to talk about passing through this 3 different times with 3 different focal points to really hone in and make sure we get a survey that is in fact what you are looking at. So once we go through that, we'll update everything and obviously bring it back. It could be as soon as, I think you guys have a meeting on the 27th. That would allow us to hit our target window then that we'll continue to talk about.
So can I make a suggestion? Instead of going through the document 3 times, can we hit the question and then ask those 3 questions of the question that we're on?
You want to go question by question?
Question by question, does this question exist? Or should it be as part of the survey? Then who should be the target audience, and do we want to modify it at all? Is that fair instead of going through the document
Yep.
3 times?
That's perfect. We can do that. So on that first page, you see a lot of the demographic information. I took feedback there on adding grandparent and guardian along with parent. And I'll just look if there is any other demographic additions, subtractions, adjustments that you would advocate for on page 1.
I think one of the questions I would pose to Laura's point about the grandparent is what direction, if that's supported by the board, because you'd have to add it multiple times. Grandparent of a current student similar to the parent, grandparent of a future student, grandparent of a former student, or does grandparent just get itself lumped into the community member with?
Are you okay with that? Just saying parent, guardian, or grandparent of? Just,
I don't know if we can lump grandparent,
Why?
parent and guardian all together.
why you're one, you,
So depends on if you're asking if you're asking for who is in charge of a student, who's in charge or taking care of a student, or if you're just talking about a member of the community that
relationship.
the relationship. Yeah.
To our school district.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's a slight possibility that you both have a student that you're parenting and a grandchild.
Yeah.
So it's okay.
Is it relevant to have them all together or separated? I can't say for sure.
So if we separated it out, what it'll allow us to do is when we segregate the data later on, we can dissect it all by demographic. So we'd be able to, if we had grandparent listed separately, we'd be able to point out the data specific to how the grandparents responded. If we lumped it in with parent and guardian of student, parent, guardian, grandparent of student, we wouldn't be able to dissect the grandparent versus the parent view of it. If that's worth anything for you that way.
To me individually, I can't speak for everyone else. It's interesting to me to know at what level grandparents are involved. But it's not, I don't know if it's relevant to this superintendent search.
Sam,
Is this one that you can select multiple options on, or is just pick one only?
Just one on this one.
Following up on that, then I wonder, and I understand parent of a current student, future student, former student. I feel like we have people that can hit all three of those, so I don't know how you prioritize which. Is it, I mean, is that a relevant thing to dissect? Or if you allowed multiple clicks in there, I'm just thought on that.
Yeah, and I can explore our capacity to make it multiple selections on that. I just got to see how it allows us to dissect that data and that feedback in the background. I'm sure it's a setting we could put on. I just want to know the cause and effect when I open that up. And then I see we have a question online.
Yes, Jeanette.
Yep. My thought on the grandparent. So you have community member with no student. What if you would have community member with a relationship with a student or family of a student or something like that? Because it could be a grandparent who's answering this who cares, but it could also be an aunt or an uncle that has no student in the school, but who also cares. So are we getting too much in the weeds? Or do we want to dice out that community member a little bit more than a community member, no relationship to a student, a community member with family ties to a student? I don't know, just a thought.
All right, thank you. Lynn?
I do think we're getting in the weeds, and I think that if we make this list twice as long as it is, people are gonna go crazy and wanna quit right from the start. I suggest parent, guardian, or grandparent of a current student, parent, guardian, or grandparent of a future student, parent, guardian, or grandparent of a former student, student, a community member with no students. How's that? Then you won't get to the disaggregation of the grandparent data, but for the purpose of a superintendent search, is it really that important?
Yeah, I agree. I don't know that we're going to be cutting the data that precisely. So, and we can replace grandparent with family member of, so if you want to be more inclusive of those relationships outside of the direct lineage. So, okay, let's continue.
All right, moving on. So if we look over onto the second page then, gets into some additional demographic information. We'll take a look through there. We have a student with specialized needs or situations in there. Gets into demographics about staff, if they're support staff, district staff, teacher, school administrator. And let me stop there because then we start getting into some of the questions itself. Any final questions on the last demographic pieces?
Did you mean for the first question on this page for it to only be for the community, or is that supposed to be for all?
Community in general, because then the staff will have a separate piece there. So if a staff member is within the district, they truly, and have a child within the district and has a student in here, they would truly be invited to fill that out, both as a staff and then both as a community member.
Thank
Good.
you.
All right, any other questions on the demographic information? All right, so going on to the next question, experience by position has been a question that we've been asked to put in some other searches that we did, and it's really getting a sense at some of the emphasis on if this person has been a superintendent or an associate superintendent, central office, administrator, principal, have they had any of those roles at all? Gets into the three responses: required, preferred, or not required.
So just so that I understand the next couple of questions, when you say 4 questions by position, you'll have a question for superintendent, question for assistant, question for central office. Okay, thank
Each
you.
one will be individual.
Thank
Yep.
you. Andrew?
Would we, is there a reason that you don't ask if they have been a teacher? Is that just because it's assumed so overwhelmingly likely, or because we have had, it's a question that's come up in the past.
Can I add on to that? In that same vein, I would actually, thank you for bringing that up. I should have thought of that. I would also like to maybe add to see if there's a possibility of also putting anything in there with ranges, if they've been a teacher, for 0 to 5 years, for 5 to 10 or something to that effect. So we can also kind of ascertain what kind of teaching experience they have, because I think that's very important.
Excellent. And with that, are you interested in level, elementary, middle, high?
I think I mean, we already have that in here, right? So I'm only interested to add how long they've been a teacher. I'm not necessarily interested in how long they've been at a particular level. Just total experience as a teacher.
Great, yep, we can certainly add that in there. Any other questions in regards to the experience by positions?
You're good?
So next up, we get into characteristics. And you see this one's highlighted in yellow. This is one that we had a conversation earlier today, and I'll allow James to certainly share a little bit more thought, or Lynn to share a little bit more thought on this. But as we look at this, for example, we're looking at superintendent leadership characteristics. And this question is within the context, like people will be prioritizing a first, a second, and a third. So 3 questions back to back in which they're identifying their first, second, and third priority for that leadership characteristics that they're interested in seeing. We had some great conversation about, well, all of these are fantastic and a lot of these should be expected, right? Very clearly, we'd be looking for these attributes and traits to come through in our applicants as they come through. But being able to identify, well, what is that first, second, or third most important trait we're looking for there? So there was some thought about, and this is where we might consider consolidating some of those options down into just a handful that you as a board are really interested in focusing or honing in on. I'll turn it over to James or Lynn if you wanted to say a little bit more about those options.
I'll just give an example, just so that we can orient to the challenge. So leadership characteristics and personality traits, these 2 questions, they're very similar in nature. Leadership characteristics, I think, are more, they manifest and people see them and they feel them outside. So when you look at who is responding to these questions, we have values shared decision making and leadership characteristics, and then visionary and forward thinking and personality traits. So in the conversation this morning, people that are going to work closely with this person will see their personality traits, right? That they'll be in those conversations, working with them, and having them be able to prioritize what they value, led me to think maybe instead of asking this of all, asking this of staff, right? Because if you ask the community to prioritize this, when I look at the list of personality traits, I say all of them, please. There's, when what we found the last time we did this was they're so close and they are just, all of them are so important. The data curve just really didn't exist. It was kind of flat, and all of them kind of received very proportional responses, which wasn't very instructive, right? But when you're talking about staff and those that have that more intimate relationship on a working level, it may be very important to ask those personality traits. Alex.
So I have a question and a comment. The question is just clarifying, they're supposed to rank these by level of importance,
Right,
right?
just the top 3.
So so just say what their top 3 are,
Right.
not rank by importance.
Correct.
Because I would agree with you then with your sentiment if that is the intention. Now, if we were to rank them, then it would give us more informed data about the difference between how people feel about those things. So that'd be something to consider. And the comment that I would have is then, in lieu of that, another way to maybe get around it is to really narrow down then to less things that are more important to us.
Right, right. So now, so you hit the nail on the head, right? So should we ask the questions in these 2 situations? I think we asked the questions. I'm not convinced we asked both questions to everybody because one of them seems much more externally focused, right? The leadership characteristics, you see that it appears on TV, it appears in community settings, and that's what our stakeholders will feel. Personality traits more internal. And then to your point, Alex, yeah, do we need all of these to choose from? So I'll stop talking and I'll go around, and if anyone has any comments first on, I think if anyone has any issues with asking the questions, say that. If you have an opinion on who we ask it to, Alex?
So I'll just add and finish then to start to go around. I would actually disagree with your sentiment as far as not asking the community and other groups, if I'm understanding you correctly, the personality trait part. I think it's really important, for example, for the community to be able to weigh in on how much they value culturally responsive and equity minded. That's just important to the community and general citizen, as it is to a teacher or other staff member. And there's a couple others. So um, I would still be willing to get that information from the other groups, particularly if we made changes to honing in on what we find important and or ranking them. So.
That's fine. Samantha.
I honestly would be fine either way. I do think that there's a bit of redundancy maybe in some of the leadership characteristics. I'm just seeing things like visionary and creative thinker versus reformer and innovator. I feel like innovation and creative thinking and being a visionary, those are reformer is the word that doesn't really fit in there for me, but otherwise I feel like those are pretty aligned. Again, in terms of somebody facilitating consensus and valuing shared decision making, I see those are again have a good deal of overlap. So maybe if we're looking at eliminating some of these, we can pull a few of those apart. I see similar things down in the personality traits, but I would say, yeah, I would almost prefer some sort of ranking of all of them that are there versus just picking a 1, 2, 3. I think that would give us some additional insight into which ones are coming consistently ranked at the top. But that's where I'm at.
Lynn?
First, I have to get clear about this. When they take the survey, and let's say there are 10 things to choose from, are they going to say, this is my number 1, this is my number 2, this is my number 3, or are they going to do X, X, X? These are my top 3.
The 3 questions will be stacked 3 times. First one will be their first priority. Second question will be second priority. Third one will be third priority. So it allows us to find the relevance and not only how many each time each trait was selected, but which weight it received. Was it first priority, second priority, or third priority? It allows us to, when we separate through the data later on and bring that back to you, you can kind of see the importance of, this one received so many first place votes, this one was second, this one was third. So the question actually gets hit 3 times, first, second, third.
Okay, so I have the answer to my question now. I went through and took the survey, but I'm sorry, it was a couple days ago and I forgot exactly how it was set up. And I felt like there were so many things to choose from that it just got in the weeds. I hear what Samantha is saying about the fact that, like, for example, 2 of these could be removed under the first question because in 2 cases there's redundancy. I just think that my concern is that if you have 1,200 people taking this survey and they have so many options, what you get back is not going to be a clear directive. It's not, I think if we are more specific about what we think is needed in our new superintendent in this district at this time, and narrow the field a little bit, we'll get better results. But I don't feel qualified to make that decision. But I hear what Sam just said, and I go along with shrinking those 4 together into 2.
Thanks. Andrew?
I think there's maybe some validity to ranking further, at least further down the list than the top, maybe than just the top 3. Not necessarily to rank all the way down because that allows for people to, not be forced to put things. Then again, you could just stop short on the rankings as well, but I think, yeah, I don't think for me, it's not going to make a huge, to me, it's a list of things that are all valuable and we're looking for a relative sorting of priorities and we'll get a bit of a direction from the public, but it's not, I think whether it's rank 3, rank 5, rank all of them, do we combine these 2? I don't think any of those modifications are going to probably give us any huge new insight, but it's a good data point to have.
Laura?
I would agree with what others have said about maybe in the first category, um, like a creative thinker, an innovator. To me, those are somewhat similar. I agree with Andrew in that maybe more than three, maybe five, as far as ranking. And in the first category under leadership characteristics, the one that really jumped out at me, and no one else has mentioned it, so maybe it's just me, works behind the scenes. I don't know exactly what that means. Like, I can't imagine anybody in an administrative position, especially superintendent, who doesn't work behind the scenes. So what is I know it, I mean, I know what that looks like, but I don't know if, like someone from the outside looking in and taking this would understand necessarily what that means. I don't know. It jumped out at me. So I don't know how valuable that is, as an option. So, and those are my thoughts at this point.
Okay, so I had heard a couple of different things there, and I'll just, Jeanette, I'm sorry. You're gonna have to keep reminding me. Kinsey.
That's okay. I would have yelled at you.
All right, good.
I would have said, "Hey, I'm here." Yeah, so I think there's a lot of choices in both the leadership characteristic question and the personality trait question, and asking people to pick three. I think, James, you said that, oh my gosh, I want to have all of them, of course. Maybe consolidating some of those choices and pulling the choices down. I don't think we need people to select more than three, because then we're gonna have so much, the data's gonna be diluted. So I think we need to pick the things that we as board members and ask some of the people in administrative positions perhaps, what do they think is good to include on this, and not make the data too diluted. As Laura said, works behind the scenes. That could even have a connotation of being non-transparent. So that might make people think like, well, what do you want? Somebody who's going to sneak around behind the scenes? I don't know. So we, less could be more. I'm
Okay.
not good at figuring out questions though, so maybe I'm not a
Yeah.
good person to ask about.
Comment, and then I'll see if I can paraphrase to try to get us in a good space here. So just end in mind type things here. So after we identify these lists, right? These lists help us identify some of those key traits as we're reading through the applicant materials. So are we reading these things coming through in letter of references? Are we seeing it come through in the pre-screeners? We can write specific questions to these elements once we identify what are those really key important items that we figure out. So yes, they're all important, but can we put emphasis on any of them through either interview questions or screeners and things like that? That's where that comes into practice, how we use those data points. So if I'm hearing things correctly, yep, we can certainly consolidate this down, and to Andrew's point, a couple others too, I think Laura mentioned it too. Do we grab 5 per each one and have them rank all 5 and just leave it as 5 as our max total? Do you not see a reason to get to 5 on all these questions? Do you not want to rank past 3? Sort of the questions.
Yeah, so, I don't think that we should kind of get down to just a number, right? I don't think that serves our purposes as much as the options in front of them should be differentiated enough where they're meaningful choices, right? And I agree that our facilitates consensus and value shared decision making. Ultimately, when I would look at the data that came back from that, I'd lump them together because they mean so. So I would make an effort, and I like, cutting facilitates consensus. I like cutting a reformer innovator because they fit the criteria of being so close to another option that it doesn't, inform us very much. But then I actually do, if there's a mechanism, if there's a control in the application that you use to then just stack rank the options, I think that will provide us a better curve than top 3 because and we'll trust that everyone was able to evaluate each option and out there. So that I would appreciate that if that's available. Do you know what I'm saying?
Say it again.
So in some of these survey controls, you have the ability to stack rank them and just order them
Yep.
and in which communicates priority. So I would prefer to be able to do that versus to choose the top three. Because between 3 and 4 might be this, super close, right? Not for me personally, but in the data set, that we would get back.
Yep. So what I need to study a little bit, James, and then get back to you folks on is if I have them do that through the survey, how I can create our dashboard to have that interactive connectivity to it, so we can articulate whether if it's staff or student, because some of that stuff I think becomes stagnant if we just have them list the in order part of it. So I got to see how I'm able to rip that through, if that's a matter of importance for us, right? So if that's an important item that we care about, being able to aggregate that data a little bit on
Yeah.
the backside of things.
And
James, I'm going to disagree with you, as I would be a community member taking this survey. And first of all, I don't think that we should have a magic number and we say everyone must have only 5. Some should have 6, some should have 7, some should have 4. But if I were taking this as a community member, it would be so frustrating for me to try to rank order all of them that I might give up, or I might start to just sort of cheat, and just, well, this is good enough. But if you ask me, of all of these 8, which are the top 3 that you think are most important, I can do that. But I think you might be asking too much of me to rank them all in order.
all right, see, this is gonna be fun, isn't it?
All right, so where do we want to go? So
So first, check, we don't even know if it's feasible to rank, right? So you need to have the ability to take a survey in and, present it back to us. And so first of all, please check and see if that's available.
I think what Lynn was saying is interesting in that we're actually talking about human psychology here. We're talking about what method is going to give us the most thorough outcome and information that's usable. And I just, I think we can't ignore that, I guess. And so I agree with Lynn.
Uh, just recognize I'm not putting something on the table that is outside the capability of the survey tools. It is a very well-known way to get a certain kind of feedback. So human psychology aside, it's a good practice.
I would also say, I think in the event that it is able to get usable data out of a drag and reorder
Right.
the items, I think that can help lower the number of questions potentially, because in the draft survey that we were able to kind of take and engage with, having 3 separate questions for each of these items got kind of clunky, because it was like, what's your
Right.
first choice? Next question, what's your second choice? So I think that would help to not limit the number of questions, but make fewer to lower those, just again, from a time perspective of our community members taking this as well.
So at this point, hearing there's some feedback in a couple different directions, would it pay to, and I can look into the capabilities of the system, but regardless, it seems like there's some desire to pare back some of the offerings between questions.
100%.
So would it be meaningful for us? Do you want to go question by question and ask for the ones we want to engage with? Or is that something you want me to send a opportunity to maybe look at it through the night, and we do that on your own time to send that feedback back to me? How would you like to navigate the time with our?
So I'll ask the board, right? Because if I were given the opportunity to decide this myself, I would say, make sure that every choice is differentiated from other choices clearly. And I would say, CISA 7, please review the questions and make sure that that's the case, and not step through these questions one by one to have a conversation about that. Because I think once you have that direction and say, they have to be clearly differentiated, and once you start realizing they're close, kill one of them, right? And I'm agnostic as to which one you kill, right? So it's I don't know that it's worth our time to step by one by one. Andrew.
My opinion would be similar. I don't think we need to spend a whole lot of time on
Right.
individual questions and responses here. Again, keeping in mind that these are to help us get a sense of priorities
Right.
of the community on something that ultimately is our decision anyways, so it's, I don't think there's a lot of, I think it's valuable to try to be sure we don't have duplicate items, but we're not, there's not very high stakes, and if we find out after we get it, oh, it would have been perfect if we merge these two as well, it's not that big of a deal.
Alex,
I'll just add, there's 10 and 11 for each category, and I would be perfectly fine to get more specific information if we just literally cut each of them in half and went from 21 to 10, 5 and 5 or something like that. And something to think about, if it's possible, if we want it, is maybe you throw in a short answer response where they could also add, anything else that they wanted, if we even, to maybe cover all the other categories you got rid of, or the less ranking, or any of the other things that people are disagreeing on. Maybe that helps, maybe it doesn't, just an idea.
can you handle raw feedback?
Yes, we could certainly put the raw feedback in. It just,
Okay.
it starts to separate then, so from the rest of the data that we pull in for that particular set. But we can still articulate it. It just comes in raw data. We could,
We could word cloud it or
And,
something like that,
we
just so that we can get an impression of what was being said.
and nestle it underneath that
Right.
particular category within the survey.
Sure. Okay.
Can I just try to summarize and help and see if we're on the same page?
Yeah.
So for those two areas, it sounds as if the board's interested in shortening the list for each. It sounds as if there's interest in keeping a ranking system within versus going away from ranking them and just having the respondents select the choices that are important to them. So keep some sort of ranking. And then just to clarify, the leadership characteristics and the personality traits the board believes should be asked of all stakeholders.
Yeah, so when Alex said, "Oh, I'm okay," I mean, I was just putting forward on the table that that's an option for us to do that. So if there's not a consensus that we segregate them, ask of all. I don't think you heard a strong intention to change it, so.
And the leadership style question is currently identified as staff only.
Did you have a question?
Yeah, I don't see why we would necessarily have a leadership. Why would we want the leadership style to be staff only? And if we do, is the same thing reflected somewhere else in a question to other groups?
Yeah, there's a similar, the very first question, it talks about leadership characteristics, that's heading out to all. And then leadership style is worded just a touch differently. And then it's got that's where you're seeing for staff. That second question down there, and it's got servant leadership, collaborative leadership, so on and so forth. So there's one similar that goes out to all that lists through the decisive leader, risk taker, visionary, and then the leadership style, where you see the servant leadership, collaborative leadership, so on and so forth. Looks like that
Yeah,
would be.
but Andrew, I don't know why we would ask someone in the community about someone's leadership style, about how they operate internally and interact with staff.
Well, I guess I could see people having very strong priority about whether they want to introduce a collaborative leader into the district versus a top-down one. I mean, I think people, I guess, I don't know, it would certainly be important it would be one of my first questions if I wasn't on the board and I was just doing it as a community member. I would want to be able to weigh in and say which kind I think is important. It would be disaggregated still. I mean, if we could see if staff and community were looking at different things, right? I guess I'm wondering why wouldn't we be interested in that?
Because in the context of daily work, the community member is a stakeholder, not a participant. And when you're holding the meetings and you're communicating priorities to staff, that leadership style is important and it builds a relationship with your staff. which the community, they consume the product and they will judge us on whether or not we are educating their children. And if the leadership style is top down or collaborative, as long as scores go up, the mission is being accomplished. So, when you're coming to work every day, the leadership style is on full display. And I don't know that it is on display out in the community. Laura?
I mean, under the personality traits, it does talk about being collaborative.
And that's gonna be
Yeah.
asked to the community,
Right,
right? So,
exactly. Like, so there is some overlap.
right, when you bundle them up and say, how do you as a leader come to work and perform your duties in front of the staff, that style is what, in my mind, differentiates the two questions and the two audiences.
Okay.
No, go ahead.
Andrew, I agree with what you're saying. I just think what you want accomplished, I think can be done as long as we continue to have a certain chunk of the personality traits, because it kind of gives the community the opportunity to answer what you and I agree with you. I think it is very important. I think they do know, and they do have a huge stake in how the employees, their neighbors, their wives, their husbands, et cetera, their friends, how they are treated, how they do have to function with their leaders. So I agree with you. I just think we can accomplish it and get the separation with just the staff by having that kind of separate category. So I kind of think you both get what you want, in my
Sure,
opinion.
yeah. Okay. Ready?
So the other question to all of that as well is there were 3 questions. We had talked about that, kind of refer back to staff and seeking some of their input as far as what are those characteristics or traits that we want to have listed for that. There was some earlier conversation about, do we reach out to some staff members and ask them for their feedback? The next couple of days here, I could work with Superintendent Byer and get the list out to the GBAA and seek their feedback on those 3 particular questions, to have much of the same sort of feedback session as we're doing right now for the rest of the survey questions.
Can you remind us of the questions that you're talking about?
Yep, so in your packet, they're gonna be the ones highlighted blue. There's one that says, the very first one you come up to is
Staff.
staff priorities.
Right.
And there is one, 2 pages
Dedicated
later.
and high quality team,
You got it. And then there's a third one right after that.
efficiency.
You got it.
operation. So the concept there is for us not to go in and detail review those. Those are staff oriented questions. So get feedback from staff on the quality of those questions, what the options should be, etc. Questions? Concerns? Lynn?
No, I'm good with that, but before we put this to bed and move on, I do have a couple other areas in the survey that I just would like to, seek input from the board and see if they're seeing it the way I'm seeing it.
Go. Are you good with her taking that?
So one is superintendent areas of expertise. If you put this, it says this is to go out to all. If you put this out to the community and ask them what's important to them, that to me is a whole different ballgame, because they don't know the workings of, inside this building. They don't know what strong administrators that are already in place. I just wonder if there should be some further refining of this. If some staff input would help narrow that down. Staff might know, God, we really need a superintendent who's good at this because it's not covered well in our staff, in our administrative leadership. Whereas the community wouldn't know that. Am I making any sense? Like, for example, anybody might say, well, of course they got to be good at budget and finance, but they might not know that we have a wonderful CFO that maybe the superintendent is going to rely on and not have to be that strong in budget and finance.
Yep, no, that certainly makes sense and goes back to some earlier comments I think Andrew was talking about too, about the importance or no importance of seeking some of those different characteristics, to James' point of well, they're not in the day-to-day stuff, right? So is the refinement of that question that it would be just for staff? Would that be your suggestion, Lynn?
I kind of think so unless somebody disagrees with me on that.
Anyone else have a strong opinion? Sam?
Are we able to, when this information comes back, you're still able to separate it out by staff reports this and community reports that,
Yeah.
correct? Okay, then I think it would be valid to see where that lands, quite honestly, from both perspectives. So as long as we can get it obviously separated out in the information at the end, I think it would be valuable from both perspectives.
And that's why I kind of left the first one on the table as well, because, you know, we have the ability to do that. Jeanette?
Yeah, I agree with Sam. I think it's really important to ask the community these things because if you look at the chatter out there, there's many of them who are talking about some of these things like budget and finance. Oh, well, that superintendent doesn't know anything. So they may think that that's really important, even though we have a strong CFO. Does the superintendent still understand the budget and finance stuff? So I think since we can separate it out by staff, as you have said, I think these are important questions for the community.
Okay. Lynn, did you have other areas that you wanted us to discuss?
I have some concerns about community priorities, which is the next one. I just feel like these aren't necessarily all community priorities. For example, communicates effectively both privately and publicly. Some of these have already been covered in other areas, like those first couple categories. And I just wondered about if maybe it needs a little review. Response to individual concerns in an appropriate, timely manner. I don't know if that fits under community priorities. That's just my thought.
I would also, thank you for kind of pulling us back for a second, because I went through all this, but there's a lot, right? So I just kind of glossed over this. I don't know how people feel about it, but again, going back to that, this is easily going to be segregated. It only takes a glance to see what of the four groups favored, you know, this versus that. Quite frankly, I could find very good reasons for everybody to be able to weigh in on the community priority aspect of this. So I would be in favor of all, to be quite honest, keeping in mind that it's very easy for us, once we get this data back, if there is all, to see the different group breakdown.
Yeah, so I would agree that if in the event that we have a question or concern, that we'd be biased towards being inclusive than exclusive on the communities. And I'll tell you, Lynn, when I looked at this, I think I felt the opposite, that one of the key interactions that the superintendent has is communicating with external stakeholders in crisis situations when there's complaints, and that effective communication is, I see it as a big community concern. And whether they, I don't remember the other one that we were discussing, but I'm okay again, erring on the side of including as many options and questions in this one. Other areas? Alex, do you have any other areas that you wanted to go through? Sam, good. Lynn, do you have others?
Just think it's too many.
Well, I think that the duration and the length of the survey is one of the issues that increases abandonment rates of surveys. Laura, Andrew, do you have anything?
I just don't have a strong feeling one way or the other. I think everything said has had some merit, and I think let's just try to get them, you know, tight. And again, I think there's not very high of stakes as to, you know, I don't think we're gonna be kicking ourselves for having consolidated a question later.
So, Aaron, can we leave the table and say that we have a board member that has expressed a concern with the complexity of stack ranking, and you have a concern potentially, you have to verify that you can actually use that kind of data. Over the course of the next couple of days, if you can determine that you can, is it possible to reconfigure just one of the questions? So that as a stacked ranked question, so that, and publish it so that Lynn or someone can go through it and just experience that kind of question out there, and then let us kind of go forward from there.
Yes, absolutely. That'll be my homework then. I'll take that back and I'll see
Lynn,
what I
is
can.
is that good with you so that you can just experience, and so you can compare it to answering 3 questions versus answering 1 question that might require a little bit more thought in that one particular question?
Well, I really probably have had experience with that already.
Oh, okay.
It's not that I'm dumb. It's just that I think that the whole thing taken as a whole, done that way, would probably get overwhelming. And
Across
people
all
would
of the
start,
questions.
and people would start doing it kind of like, oh geez, let's just get this done kind of thing, rather than thoughtfully, that's all.
Thank you for that. Okay, I understand now.
Yep. So with that feedback, then I'll take it back and see if we can do the stack rank in 1 question rather than 3. It'll take that 5-minute-ish survey completion probably down to 2 or 3, I might assume, if I can eliminate 3 of those questions in there. Because on average, we were finding our folks were completing this within 5 or 10 minutes or so for an individual, if they were just doing the staff one, just doing a community one. So getting rid of those stack rank, if it's just a single question instead of 3, anticipate being able to shorten the delivery of that. My other homework assignment is going to take it back and see if I can make sure we attend to your points of having greater difference between the different options that are in there, which is going to help us narrow down some of those options to begin with. Is there any other direction in terms of going past 3 on our rankings? We had some conversation in both directions. I just want to make sure I have a clear path forward on that.
Anyone?
I have a question not related to the ranking, but something that just popped in my head. This is for community and staff. What about students? Are they going to be part of this survey?
They are. Students are part of the community survey goes out, so they can identify if they're a student who is completing this as well. So we'll be able to take their data and dissect that apart from others as well.
Okay, great. I must have missed that.
Yeah,
That
it's in
there
the
was a choice of
demographics under about
I
you.
see that about. Yeah, because we were talking so much about parents and grandparents, and I think I just sort of zoned over that. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Laura?
I don't know if this is premature, but I would, if there's any plan or even initial plan, I wouldn't mind hearing about how we plan to encourage the public to take this survey, this very, very important survey, right? And I don't know if that's Lori's, she's done many, many, many of these surveys over the years, but I don't know, I'll be very interested to see the result of this survey. There's going to be a lot of, just from what you've laid out here, a lot of really good data will come from this, and some really interesting insight into how our community is currently feeling about leadership in our districts. So I don't know what the plan is. And maybe it is premature.
Nope, something that we've already talked about. So Lori and I had met, I don't know, a week or 2 or so ago to talk about communication throughout the whole process. And she has mentioned that she would help us do the communication points out to the different presses, to using the student information system to push out communication that way. And so we'll do all those different avenues on the website even to make sure that all the information is accessible to folks. Multiple languages, so we're lining up opportunities for that to make sure we don't have any barriers for people to complete the surveys themselves. So
Jeanette, did you have your hand raised?
I did. But now I don't remember what I was going to ask because I was listening to Aaron. So if it pops in my head, I'll just ask you. It must
All
not have
right.
been important.
Okay, so it is not premature to say this because I think the timeline now is we basically have a week to lock it down, bring it back to the board table next Monday. There's going to be an action agenda item for us to approve the survey and go. So as in preparation for that, we've given CISA kind of a deadline this week for kind of final, so that it will be posted later in the week, so that
Yeah.
we'll have an opportunity to review it this weekend in advance of Monday evening, all right? And then I think it goes live when? The next day?
Well, right now it's tentatively set up for the 27th through 14th to have a go live
Okay.
date. And that's what I was just really quickly checking, because I don't want to go too fast and miss some important steps with that, right? So my goal is to have it set up and ready for you guys. I'll call it consume. You can consume the data at our meeting on the November 24th. So I may have a little room to play with that, to push it back a little bit. That gives us more time to manipulate that, the survey a little bit. What I want to know is past the 27th, which is, when is the next time you guys are getting together as a meeting that you might be able to take action on this?
So, we would have to do a special and attached to our work session. So sometimes when we have these kind of off-cycle action items, so the second Monday in November, I don't exactly know the date. No, that's yeah, November 10th would be our work session. So we could prepend that with a special board meeting to take action on it, which shortens the window a lot.
Well, I would push the window back. I would still
But-
leave like a 2-week window. So if we did still 2 weeks from
So
10
this-
to 21, that was, yeah, well, yeah.
So yeah, but then we run into, you want to,
I'd have to turn it over into the weekend, which I don't think is that big of a deal. Once I have the structures in place, we
But-
can get that turned over.
but wait just a second though. We want to go open the recruitment window on December 8th, right? And I know that this, the survey and the community feedback sessions are serving two masters. One is how you're going to pre-screen and how we're going to evaluate candidates, but also we want an opportunity to make sure that the posting's right.
Correct.
Right? And so if we push the window back, we're going to miss our meeting on the 24th, right?
Nope, I would still be able to, that's what I'm saying, is I think I might be able to hit our meeting and be prepped for the 24th to have all that dissected. So once I build the tool, the analytical tool to dissect the data, once I have that built,
It flows in. But so then the
pretty quick.
window would be like from the 10th to the what?
it'd be a 2-weekish like we have now. So if we did 10th through
So
the,
you're really not shortening the window, you're just really just backing it up. Okay,
sliding it back a little bit. We may have a little bit more time. What I have in here, 27th through the 14th, a little greater than 2 weeks, with the 2.5 weeks there. So we might be missing about a half week, but let me see what I can get done this week yet. So if I can get something
Okay.
back to you folks yet this week, so you can have item action for Monday, that would be my first goal. But like I mentioned, I'd rather take my time and then, and get it right. And so we have it right. So it's giving us really valid data as we go through.
yeah. So on Monday, we have a couple of options. We can take a work product and we can approve it, we can amend it, or we can table it for board meeting in early November.
Yep. Yeah.
Sound good?
And I do want to go back, because I don't know if I got clarity on the ranking.
Okay.
We had 3, there was some conversation of doing past 3, just to 3. Do we have a consensus we can get to, do you want me to
Yeah.
go past 3?
So you took and you built this off of, I saw some references to other surveys that you referenced to help you build this survey out. And
Mhm.
I don't want to reinvent a wheel. I'm much more interested in, the number of options, and those options are really, they stand alone versus 3, 5, or what have you. So if you can point to standards saying top 3 is what's, you see, just give us discrete options.
Okay.
Okay? Is everyone okay with that? Lynn,
But I thought you had asked him to do that,
he's gonna just, he'll do one just to see it, but in the event that, we say no, he has directions of how to set them up.
but that is still an option
Um,
for the whole survey. Yes,
Sorry, to rank past 3.
no, to stack rank. And I'd,
That's what I'm exploring.
yeah,
And my question to that was, do you want to go past 3, or do you want the direction to say, give me your top 3, or rank all of them that are in the list in an order? That's the
So,
clarity I'm seeking.
it would be a different style of question though, right? One would be a single question that was sortable or, right?
Put these in order.
Put these in order, right? Versus a question for each one. it wasn't until Lynn said, reminded me of how many of these questions that have 10 options, when would that get laborious over the course of a survey? I can take it or leave it at this point. Anyone? Go with what you presented then, and since we have a week, don't put a lot of effort in trying to redesign your instrument if everyone's okay with that.
Yeah, I think the one thing we probably, if I heard everybody correctly, have clarity on is getting just lesser, more precise answers
Yeah.
is the one thing I think all 7 are uniform on, so.
Yeah.
I'm fine.
Jeanette?
So, yeah, so I remembered what I wanted to ask. How do we make sure that the people who are answering these questions are within our district, or does that not matter? Like if somebody who doesn't even live in the Green Bay area school district, they live in De Pere, or they live in Minnesota and they're a grandparent or something like that, does that really matter? Or do we want to, are we trying to keep it just people who live in this district? And if so, how do we make sure that occurs?
Yep, great question. No true way to control that as we go through this.
Right.
If people, in the feedback I've gotten in other searches we've done, if people have the spare time that they want to knock this thing out from a different district, that they'll take that feedback. But for us to keep it open to all community members and not lock it down to specific individuals, open is open. It's hard for us to control. There wouldn't be an opportunity for us to have them verify an address, so to speak. So great question though.
Okay, thanks.
Can you, some of the survey tools allow you to geofence and just do Wisconsin base or what have you. Is that part of your tool, or can you look at that?
We'll look.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, ready to move forward?
Yeah.
So the next one we're going to talk about then is our focus group opportunities in those events. So it's the next document on the right-hand side in your folders. So this was one, again, I spent some time working with Lori on identifying some of the specific and target groups. But overall, the idea with this one is it's in this document, it's really creating and outlines the potential events to seek feedback from the various groups across the district here. Again, we can look at this in a couple different ways. There's a set of questions that I would propose and consider, we can consider here this evening to take a look and see if you're good with the question sets. The second part of that is you're okay with our target audience groups and events that I set up. That's about on the bottom of that first page there. You see the various events that are targeted for specific folks. And then lastly, on page 2 of that focus group process, there's a whole list of potential community members and groups for us to reach out to specifically. So this was a list that I think Lori had shared with me that was used in the past. Our communication will go out that it is welcoming all those different community groups to participate, but we'd specifically reach out to these folks and invite them to the events that are listed underneath their time frame. So as we look at that as a whole, that's sort of the whole idea with the focus groups. And again, that data is going to be able to come back together as well. We can compile it all together and present it back to you as here's what these focus groups said on these particular questions. This is typically done. What I've had really good success with is using the cafe model where we got the folks at the tables. Maybe if we have 3 or 4 questions set up, there's 3 or 4 tables set up with the different posters on there. People will spend about 15 or 20 minutes at each table, have a chance to dialogue with others at the table, make sure we get their information down on the paper. We'll rotate through so everybody gets through all 3 or 4 questions, whatever we decide on, and we'll have all the feedback given to us through each poster. At the end of the event, we'll have whoever the final group is at each poster do a quick summary so people can kind of hear what the groups behind them had mentioned through that. So then we would take that data and information back, compile it, put it back in. It can be part of our survey list too, so we can take a peek at those questions as well. So that's a little bit the process, the groups, and some of the potential questions that we would have for those community focus groups. So I'd be open to your feedback based on the question sets and targeted groups and/or events.
Anybody? Alex?
I would like to see a way to have staff broken down, possibly. And maybe it's worth talking to the union about, or other groups of people, but I really think, having taught all grade levels myself, that there are definitely different perspectives on what is needed, what's valuable, and they're all meaningful, but definitely different, within different groups, be it elementary teachers, middle school teachers, high school, and then if you really want to, you can get into non-teaching staff. So I would definitely be interested in some way to get more specific feedback from, those chunks of people.
Jeanette?
I was looking over the list of community groups to reach out to. I don't think there's a Hmong community group on there to reach out to, which I think is an important group to reach out to in our community. And what about We All Rise? I don't see that one on here. But I don't know that much about We All Rise, that would be a group to reach out to. But I think there are some Hmong groups that have some young families in them that are important to reach out to.
Lynn?
And I just noticed also, I don't see COMSA on here, the Somali Association. COMSA, COMSA. And we're just making sure that you changed Bay Area Community Council to Envision Greater Green Bay. Okay, but you've got it. Okay.
Andrew?
I would agree with the other additions that were mentioned, and I think everything on the list of community groups is good, but I think the list of groups selected here does skew somewhat, establishment, white collar, more privileged, I guess. I think adding some of the ethnic groups that were discussed and missed is part of it. I don't see Oneida on here. That's important, and I don't know how exactly you get maybe something like the obviously we're going to talk to unions that represent the groups here of staff here, but I think maybe there's some value in maybe talking to the Labor Council about trying to reach out and get some of the and get some other perspectives of blue collar perspectives.
So list refinement is the primary feedback. Any other feedback on the, Samantha?
I would just urge urgency with this, considering these are 2 weeks away and getting dates on calendars, and some of these especially, and I understand some of the business organizations are scheduled for like midday or noon, but like getting these out and promoted
Right.
ASAP so that people can hold space for it.
Lynn?
This might seem really picky-unish, but I think it's kind of important in looking at the potential questions. The first question, I just think when you ask people to tell what they love most, you're asking for an emotional response that might not have anything to do with the actual status of the district right now. I'd rather it be stated something like, what does GBAPS do very, very well, or something like that. Just not to start people talking about when I went to West High School and that sort of thing.
Maybe a word to use is value or something, because I think that's actually a really good point. That's, yeah, and just to make sure, and, because people started listing off groups, but arguably the one that to some degree represents the largest group of students in our district is to make sure on that list, you definitely reach out to Casa Alba. So I just want to make sure that's not glossed over either.
Oh, sorry, they have a special event listed there. That was specific, again, information I got from Lori to do a special one just for CASA. Yep. Sorry, I cut you off, Alex? Did you have something else with that? What I thought about for that first question is something, asking people to celebrate something about the district rather than the value, or the value rather than the love statement that you had there too, so we can certainly refine that. So I'd like to go back to Alex's question though, and just get some consensus on staffing, if we want to do, or if you want to direct us to do 3 different events, if I heard you correct, Alex, elementary, middle, high, to allow us to pull that data apart a little bit as far as those specialty areas. Is there other feedback or consensus about creating separate events for each of those 3 levels?
Lynn?
Can you just do them all at the same time and put them in 3 different rooms?
Yeah, yeah, whatever logistically is easiest is best. I just think having that stuff segregated is valuable. However it could work, I'm all for it.
Do some of this school level.
Take it back from me, I took it from you.
Sorry, do some of the school levels do it all at different times of the day? So you could start elementary later, high school earlier?
Maybe 4:30 is Yeah, I think,
Yeah.
yeah, chatting with Lori, I know she had mentioned 4:30 would be a good start time for any of those events that are after school and just in general. So we could certainly look at taking the idea of keeping the same time, doing 3 separate rooms for that, so.
I have just a general question, and this kind of links this back to the survey. I communicated some kind of discomfort during our meeting at noon around some of the overlap of the questions and for the focus groups versus the survey, because we know that we're going to have a lower attendance here than response to the survey. But then when Alex said, hey, can we just have some free text contributions? Would it be reasonable to put these questions at the end of a survey as optional ways to, because they are different, right? This is, hey, what do you value that we do well or whatever? And if we feel it valuable to ask a focus group that question, is there a reason why we wouldn't extend that question to the entire survey population?
It's already there.
Where?
So the very last questions about the district say, and it's listed and it's.
I
very
looked
different.
and I'm sorry I missed that because I looked
Yep.
specifically to make sure.
So the last one reads, if you could say one good thing about the GBA school district, what would it be? If there's one thing we need to, more attention on, what would it be? So we can reframe that to kind
Yeah,
of hit those.
maybe I just didn't connect the dots there, but yeah, I agree because I was looking for 4 and I saw 2, so,
Yeah.
okay.
Other feedback on the question sets other than making the adjustment to that question 1?
I think we're good.
Good there?
Yeah.
All right, let's move forward then. Home stretch. Home stretch. And then, like I mentioned, I will continue to work with Lori then on building out those events and communicating. I know we got the Neville on hold for us right now for that one all day. We're kind of there all day for various things. And I'll work with Lori then on securing locations within the district office. She was really helpful on some of that too. So we'll work forward on that. All right, so the next document then in your folder is going to be talking about the first round of interview. And I'm going to talk through this a little bit, and of course we'll look at it, dissect it a little bit, but I just want to give you the kind of the crux of the context of what's going on here. So the structure of that first interview series is really set up as a 3-way rotation that each candidate will go through as they come through. So they will all have an interview with the board. That's just with the board. Right now we had a mocked public relations scenario where they would work with Miss Blakesley and then actually record a mock public appearance for which the board can view later on. And then the third and final one would be for them to interview with an advisory committee. And so this is based on some feedback. I met with James a few weeks back just about some of the desires coming through previous opportunities with this and said, hey, if we could, I'm like, that's a great idea. Let's work in the public relations piece. So the candidates would come in, they'd rotate through each of those 3 items. Board at the end of the evening then would have an opportunity to view their public relations media posts that publish for us. And we'd run that for our February 24, 25, and 26th evenings. Now, just some things to note before we open up to dialogue there, that the board will align the interview questions that will be used for the board. We're going to spend some purposeful time on that as we get later on down the process, so we can refine that based on what the things we're looking for. So we'll get to you, so there'll be opportunity for that. There'll be a separate set of questions for the advisory committee. Okay, and so that advisory committee is that next point of emphasis I want to talk about. So this could be in previous searches that we've done, it could be members of staff with administration, with community, any sort of combination. Maybe it's key community members. I've had really large groups, I've had smaller groups with that. So I'd be seeking your feedback as we consider the use of that advisory committee, who we want to include. While you're thinking about that a little bit, I just want to make sure we're intentional with our communication outward as we invite folks to participate into that. We really lean into the name that this is an advisory committee. Like you're not in a decision-making capacity as part of this. We're seeking your feedback. They'll have opportunities to provide scores and their feedback for each candidate as they come through the interview process. The board will be able to see those scores separate from their own, and how that advisory committee felt about each candidate coming through. So again, I just wanted to make sure and reiterate, that's not part of the decision-making body. They wouldn't be with the board in closed session talking about every candidate. You would gain their insight through their scores and coming through that process. So I'll stop there and see if you guys have any questions in terms of process and a little bit later on down the road, we can certainly, consider who's going to be part of that advisory committee, but I just wanted to plant that seed and get some feedback.
And I'll start by saying, this is that point where we're talking about something that was different than our last pass. And it's designed this way because, I agree with Laura. We went in and we got to finalists, and several board members felt, underinformed. And the board had 65 minutes or something like that of, a round of questions. And then it was the finalists presentation day in the district where some of this stuff happened. Well, we're already down to 2, right, at that point, or 3 at this point. So this is kind of re-envisioning the first interview where they get exposure to a lot of different stuff and spend 3-ish hours here at the district going through a couple of different interviews. So questions or concerns about the proposal? Andrew?
I like it. I think there should be 1 or 2, in addition to other categories that I'm sure I don't have to say. I think there should be 1 or 2 students on it, actively committed to participating through each interview.
Yeah, so I don't necessarily want to get into the composition of the advisory committee tonight, because I think we all should think about it, and we really need to make sure that we have HR in the room, and we understand the guidelines that we want to put in place for that advisory committee. But I agree that it should be representative of a lot of different stakeholders in the district. So, Sam.
Just to clarify, you mentioned obviously those questions that the board would be using, the questions that the committee would be using, those will be formulated later based on all of the feedback from both survey and focus groups. Is there an opportunity also then to utilize a common evaluation tool across all of those pieces in terms of like, is the board going to be using an evaluation tool or a scorecard or a checklist or whatever? Is that going to look the same in past? Would that look the same as the community, or I'm sorry, the committee interview piece? That's my first question. The second one is there some sort of an evaluation tool then for us to use while we are screening those public relations pieces?
Yep, great question. So the way I've done this process is to use an electronic scoring process, which has that rubric right on there. So with that, you would have a question, you would have an opportunity to rank them. It's typically 1 through 5 on a scoring. You have a place for your notes on one side too, to kind of keep tabs for yourself as you're scoring through. Because to be honest, and to speak to that a little bit, quite honestly, as you go through the interview process, you might hear a candidate say an answer like, oh yeah, that's a 4. later on you hear another answer like, no, that's my 4. This is really a 3. So you can go back and make those adjustments along the way. So to answer your question then too, Samantha, is yeah, as we do the electronic scoring for both the board and the advisory committee, would be able to bring those scores and show you aggregate scores of that committee and how they scored each candidate by, their highest point gatherer through that, and be able to even break it down by category and question on how they got scored through that as a summative for that. Where we get off just a little bit is because we'll have a different question set, we won't be able to stack them and mirror them right exactly in line, but you'll be able to see based on their question set, here's how our advisory committee ranked each candidate coming through. How does that match with our ranking based on our question sets? So unless we had the exact same questions, which I don't think I would recommend in this case, you won't be able to mirror them, but you'll be able to stack them and see real.
Sure, Sam.
Is there some sort of time built in then for our advisory committee members to do some amount of learning around what that evaluation tool looks like? I know many of us are used to using that sort of evaluation tool. I just, depending on the composition of that committee, I would be concerned that there needs to be at least something built in on the front end so that they're confident and capable of using that tool.
Yeah, so the communication that we put out in front hand is just to identify, and it would be something we'd be working with the district too, because if we're doing it here, is it something that the district can support the devices for those community members coming in, and we'll have to work through the logistics with that. And I'll just say it this way, haven't had a problem yet with anyone breaking it, because it's really a drop down 1 through 5, but I do communicate out ahead of time what it looks like. I'll give them some still shots of here's what you'll have access to when we go through the scoring that evening. You'll be doing the drop down, you'll spot for notes, talk through each piece, and then that evening too, we instruct and kind of just showcase, here's what this platform looks like.
Lynn,
Will the advisory committee actually create their own questions or have input to the creation of the questions at all?
So no, what I would like to do is, and again, something logistics we can talk about down the line too, is consider a question set and maybe even start here at the board table to see what questions that you would want us to lean forward on. And at that point, it'd be a matter of us going back to if there are specific community members or staff that you wanted to look at those questions as well and say, what are we missing? How do we refine this? That we can, just like we're doing on the survey work, continue to refine those through in that manner.
Laura,
Forgive me if I missed this. How is this committee being chosen?
we haven't discussed that yet, so
Okay.
we need to, yeah.
Okay.
Jeanette, do you have anything?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Alex?
I agree with what's been said already. I'm not going to be redundant.
Not that this is a big deal, but just I want to make sure that we at least see all the options of people for us to consider. Is, at some point, maybe a list or something that you could give us now or sometime in the future, because I might be able to think, like you said, over the next week or so, and I might think, oh, hey, these are great, but then there might be a whole bunch of other ones that would be great that I just don't think of. So from past experience, maybe there's a list of like the different types of people to consider at some point to share.
So just to set expectations that the composition of the advisory committee is not a November deliverable. We have some time to be considerate of who we, because this is for a February 24th, 25th. So we don't want to wait too long, but it's not a rush at this point. Yeah. Andrew, sorry.
Yeah, I think the board, even though it's likely that we'll be able to have some consensus and probably have unanimity, I think we need to vote on who will be on the advisory committee. That's just too influential of a committee to have someone outside of the board decide who's on it.
Fair.
I would just add, you might want to check your policy based upon calling it an advisory committee. There are normally policies.
Yeah,
that
we'll
speak of that and how they're formed and the goal and purpose and
Right.
things like that.
we've over the last couple of years had several discussions about that, and I think we have a process. Yeah. You might have to write a charter.
Yeah, so one of the things to Andrew's point too, we'll be really considerate of is making sure we have a good cross section. So we have elements from elementary, middle, high school represented, teaching staff, support staff, administration. And in terms of other potential, just to get your mind going a little bit, Alex, we'll talk about later, if there's other key community members or key business partners that the district teams with quite a bit to have their feedback. That would be important. So just to get your mind thinking, but yeah, we can absolutely put that together when we come back and focus on that committee, we can.
Yeah. So again, we'll have a time to talk about it. I just want to make sure that everyone understands that putting the schedule together should surface a key constraint, and that's time, right? So the size of the committee does not have to be proportionate to the number of questions and answers you can get in an hour. There can be listeners, right? There could be observers on the committee, but recognizing, in my experience, you got 7-ish questions that you can ask and deserve a deliberate response from before the hour's up. And then you move on. So we have to be really considerate about what can get done in an hour. Right. Other questions about the schedule for first round?
Has anybody noticed that Superintendent Byard gets to eat pancakes 3 days in a row?
You know, no. I think you have to rephrase that. Has to eat pancakes 3 days in a row.
And that's a great transition into round 2 of interviews. But hey, we did talk about CISA 7 gets to facilitate some of those sessions as well. So we might be along for the pancake ride.
And I love pancakes. Just for
Yeah, so we'll get into that. So that final document that we're taking a look at is really similar to that day in district you guys have utilized in the past, and Superintendent Byard shared that experience with me, and we certainly built it into this model here, which you're seeing. And really what this is looking to get to is a designed opportunity for them to tour a few different district locations, have the candidates interact with key district groups, including administration, CVEA, provide an opportunity for the candidates to interact with the media and the community. And then finally, a working dinner interview with the board back here at the district office. And you'll even note within the schedule, which I think is a little bit different than last time too, there is some chunks of downtime throughout their day as well, as we took some feedback that it was a pretty tight day for those candidates coming through in years past. So this would be that second round of interview. We got it narrowed down. Potentially 3 people would be great to be in that 2 to 3 people range when we get to this point in time, and working them through this process. I'd need to get some feedback yet, but we'd certainly have time to consider that, of who would be included for pancakes with Superintendent Byer there. That leadership lunch meeting too, who might be included with that. And then working through logistics, and again, working with Ms. Blakesley on communicating out the meet and greets with both the community and the other folks that we're listing there. So certainly open to feedback on what our second round of interview schedule could look like.
Any questions, concerns? So, a difference, not only is there more kind of downtime built into the schedule, because I'm sure it is extraordinarily difficult to be on, for 8 hours of a particular day. But the dinner, last time it was hosted offsite, and it was a long table. It was really ineffective for holding an interview. And so coming back here, having something catered in allows us to actually treat it like an interview, right? So again, Laura brought out, I felt as a participant last time that the second interview really wasn't a second interview. It was really just a day in the district, and the board didn't have an opportunity to dig deeper into the candidates, right? It was very social, and it wasn't substantive out there. So I think we have some opportunities. There's a couple of downtime, and we could toy with the schedule in the event that we need some more time. Also, I do think that after the first interview, as we prep for the finalists, a couple of things. We plan for 3 days, just from a scheduling perspective, in the event that we want to add a third candidate. Last time we only went to 2, and we had a discussion as to even whether we could do 3. So we're just planning so that we can add a third. I felt like the way ask questions in the first round. We wanted every candidate to get the same set of questions, which is fair. And given the short amount of time, there was no opportunity to dig and to focus on any one question, and nor do we think that it would have been appropriate to do that. I think it is appropriate for us not to prep really any second interview questions until the first interviews are done. And now we have our opportunity to say, what do we want to drill into to differentiate the finalist candidates out there? So again, Laura, hearing the feedback, right? And making sure that we have every opportunity to learn as much about these candidates as possible.
So to continue on that conversation, then just to add to and support to what President Lyra was saying, on the 26th, during that first round, we have just a single opportunity, if needed, to bring a seventh candidate in for that first round of interviews. And the whole rest of that time then for us to do our deliberations, do our candidate selection for round two, and then look at what didn't we hear? What do we want to hear more of for our second round, and hone in on those topics? And even do maybe minimal question refinement, but I can bring that back and we can communicate on that before that second round to hone in on exactly what you're looking to hear from on those candidates.
Yeah, Alex.
I'm curious what your plan, experience, and what everybody's thoughts are, looking at this finalist interview. And where I'm going with that specifically is, if it wasn't already intended, I think there's a lot of value in having board members being present amongst a lot of different groups throughout the day and seeing how our superintendent reacts, interacts, and the feedback that they give with those different groups of people. So I don't know if the idea was just for us to have our one chunk and not be around any of the other times, but I think it would be great to see what the interaction and what the questions and the feedback is like between possible superintendent and the current leadership team. Same thing goes for a lot of the other groups. How do they communicate with the media? How do they communicate with staff in the district? And being able to be present and see that, I think it can ascertain a lot of really important information. So I'm just curious on everybody's feedback on that.
Laura.
I find that interesting, an interesting idea. How do we implement something like that equitably amongst the whole board, though? Not everyone will have that availability necessarily. I mean, I probably would and probably could make that happen, but what if you can't? So there's something to think about, but I think that is valuable to be in the room to listen to how the candidates interact with the various groups.
So I think if I remember correctly, I went to the community meet and greet
Yeah.
and watched them answer community questions. So I agree. I think some of these things, some of these events are absolutely should be open to board member invitation. When I interview people at work, I also create safe spaces for interviewees to ask questions. They may want to inquire about the board, and having board members present is not necessarily good for all of these events. So I think it's a mixture, Alex, that we do that. So
I just want to agree with that. Like, there might be rooms where it wouldn't be beneficial to
Yeah,
have a
and-
board member there.
And to those points, and I'll circle back even to our focus groups later on, as we line up all those events, that would be something that I would invite board participation in, so you can hear firsthand some of those comments that are happening around the tables as we go through those 3 or 4 questions, or those 4 questions that we line up with. The other point to that too is, if I understand correctly, last time, the services you use weren't necessarily present at all those events either. And it was a specific conversation I had with Superintendent Byer that I certainly would want to be part of those events, so we can, one, make sure they go off smoothly and we keep everyone on time and on task. And then 2, we can bring back that other relevant feedback that we might be able to provide you of, well, what happened and what are we looking for? Even to the point is, if as we approach that second round and we're looking at those various events, if there are specific look fors, you might be interested to bring that feedback back. We can hone in on that, bring you our feedback back to the table for the board to hear as well.
Samantha. Oh, sorry, Jeanette.
Yeah, so the idea of having board members with the final candidates. I think that you can't have one board member with candidate one and a different one with candidate two and a different one with candidate three. If you're gonna use that feedback in deciding who to hire, I think if you're gonna have board members present, I feel to be fair to each candidate, you have to have the same board member present observing each candidate in that situation. Does that make sense?
I think you just articulate that it's complicated, right?
It
And
is.
we would just, I don't want
Because you wouldn't
to,
want there to be you wouldn't want a board member to see candidate one and say, oh, this is the best candidate because I saw him interacting with people and they were really great. And then they don't see candidate two and three to make a comparison. It's not
Yeah.
fair to candidate two and three. Then if I come into the room and say, well, I really want one because I saw how they interacted with other people, it's just the same thing of when you're interviewing people, you have to be consistent with the questions you're asking. So you're asking the same questions to each candidate.
I understand. Yeah, and I know that it would be complicated. Look, we did have open sessions. We are also members of the community. So again, you can come to the community session. But structuring it as a formal channel of feedback into the decision-making process is,
It's a challenge.
it is very challenging. Sam and then Andrew.
Just to clarify, several of these items on here say facilitated. I'm assuming that would be facilitated by somebody from CISA 7. Awesome. And then, just looking at the combined, meet and greet with both staff and public, has that been something that's been successful in the past? Or should we give staff a time and space that's just them that maybe leads into public time? I'm just concerned that maybe depending on, the amount of public and community that do show up, maybe our staff voices aren't being heard and maybe our staff isn't having an opportunity to engage at that level with the candidates.
And I don't want to put her on the spot, but as one of the conversations that Lori and I had too is just the amount of the events that took place and passed and how this kind of came to shook out. So again, not to put you on the spot, but did you have any feedback on what that might look like, Lori? Or what you might recommend? Or maybe how it's worked in the past even.
So I think first of all, they're all public meetings, so you can't really deny people access to the meeting. And then two, I think what we had said was, well, this was identified for the staff meet and greet, and this was identified public meet and greet. Given that people may have scheduling conflicts with any of those dates, they could attend any one of the events. So that was sort of the rationale for how it was done in the past.
I'm sorry, Andrew. Are you sure?
Yeah.
Okay.
I certainly think it would be preferable and recommended if, especially for board members, that if you were going to go to one, that you would try to be at all of the candidates' appearances, but I don't think the board can or should attempt to ban someone from going unless you can go to all of them, but I do think you should do so, and I would, in deciding whether I wanted to do it personally, my decision would have a lot to do with could I go to all or not go to all.
Lynn.
And following up on that, I would expect that what I learned from a fellow board member who attended an event that I didn't attend would not be a summary of, well, I think this is the best candidate based on what I saw, and this is the second best, and this is the third best. I would expect the board member to give me some very specific, like something I observed, something I heard, and this is how it made me feel, or this is the conclusion I drew, without trying to tell me, who they would now vote for.
Right.
And I just want to add that I don't eat pancakes, so I'm not going to those.
Okay, Alex, and then back to Sam.
Quickly, I eat pancakes at least 2 or 3 times a week, so I'm definitely going every day. No, and that's no lie on the pancakes. But no, I appreciate that, Lynn, and Andrew, I agree with you. And again, my whole mindset is I think The more information that we can gather, the better, and it's simply an information gathering opportunity. And lastly, I would piggyback off of what Sam said. I don't want anybody to take offense to this, but we have a lot of other opportunities for community to provide us with pretty substantial feedback. I think keeping in mind what this is specifically, the finalist interview, this is one of the circumstances in this process that I don't know that it's prudent to have the community involved at this point considering that we have a whole day's time constraint. All the feedback you provided from the time constraints from before, I would be okay if this is just a staff time, keeping in mind we have 3,500 staff, and that time is going to amount to nothing if you're trying to fit that in with 130,000 community members that comprise our district. So just something to think about. I'm curious on any feedback. Just a thought.
Then,
Lori pointed out that these are public meetings, but now stay with me here, Alex. Our board meetings are public meetings. People can come and they can listen, but they cannot speak, only during public forum. So I would say that when the staff is meeting with the candidates, the public would be welcome to come and listen and observe, but that doesn't mean that they're going to in any way take up the time or change the focus. I think it can work as long as people understand. It's just like a school board meeting. You sit and listen. Does that work, Alex?
I hear what you're saying, but correct. If I'm not understanding correctly, I don't know if that's what that's supposed to be like, though.
right. So as it's written, I don't think we would have to change how it's framed and structured. If I remember last time, it was more, they were standing in front of a group of people and we were watching them answer questions on their feet, right? And it was more, how do they interact with the public, interact with people? And that was one of the things where, structuring the media component of the interview forward into round one helps us with that. And so we have some opportunities to maybe restructure that kind of thing. It can't be more than, submit questions and let us answer them. It's just the scope of, how we do that.
I'll just provide a little context, and I think Samantha may have been next here. So as we see facilitated, the idea behind that being is that people will come in and pose questions for us. We would review those questions to make sure they're appropriate, relevant, and not like complete off the wall. And if they're redundant, we'll stack them together and allow one person to come forward and ask that question. I see this at the start to allow the candidate maybe just to address the general mass and general statements they'd like to make while we're collecting some of those questions. And then we'd be able to call the community members up or even just read the questions for the community members to make sure we can have a real good control and keep a good time as we go through that process for them. So just to provide a little context, when I talk about being facilitated, yep, absolutely. Their questions, their voice is coming through, and have that candidate be able to interact and speak to those things
So
too.
Sam and then Laura.
I don't understand exactly what he said. Can I
Okay.
ask? So I thought that this was facilitated with staff and public. And so now you're saying that the public will submit a question. Where does the staff fit in here?
Well, whether if it's staff or public asking the questions, same
Right.
thing, right? So if the
Okay.
staff are submitting their questions, we would look to collect those questions. Again, just put some reasoning and order behind it.
Laura. I'm sorry.
Just as this structure of this is very similar to academic interviews that I've been a part of myself personally and have facilitated a number of times. Just as a note, as candidates who are going to be here with the day with us, I think are anticipating being on all day. I appreciate the scheduling of what we, in my role, call human breaks and having a bit of downtime. But I am a little worried that 3 to 5, that 2 hours is a long chunk of time. And I think that gives people an opportunity to kind of get out
Check out.
of
Yeah.
the groove, especially knowing that there's that huge brick of time right before engagement with our public and staff, and then us as the board. So I don't know if there's a way to potentially shift timing around a bit or extend certain pieces of this for later in the day. I just, especially later in the afternoon, 2 hours is a huge chunk of time to have unstructured and yes, we all need human breaks. We need a chance to decompress a bit. But again, as a candidate coming to an interview like this, I think you're expecting to be on and having to be on for the full day. And getting out of that frame of mind, I think is not beneficial. So.
Yeah, if I could, I'll just reply real quick. A real easy thing would be to split the difference in that time and just make sure we're after that 4:30 time frame to make sure staff could attend. And I think that's what we're doing at first, is just to clear that 4:30 time. We could easily split the difference and pull that time up a little bit.
Laura.
Um, just going back to the kind of the structure of that, of the public, where that's how we did it last time. We had people submitted questions on cards.
Right.
Then there's some control, right? And you know, they have to be clear in what they're asking by writing it down and having someone then read it. And you also get through more questions that way. And of course, we want as many questions as possible in that period of time. And it's really just another test for these candidates on their feet, answering random questions from the public, and it's very informative.
Alex.
Super quick. For whatever reason, I didn't catch that 2 hour block. So I'll just put one last push out there for just to consider, we got time for this, but to consider adding in shifting time more or separating for staff, for teachers. I just think there's a lot of value in that. Especially again, considering the quantity and the possible volume that you'll get lumping those two large groups together. So now that I realize there's that large block, definitely want to make one more push for that.
Lynn.
I support that. I think that Alex is right, that the staff needs to have some time just to themselves with the final candidates.
All right. Are we done?
And so just going back to where we started, just with their schedule, it's just to make sure, as President Larry pointed out, if we can please make sure we reserve those dates for the first and second round of interviews. So February 24, 25, 26 for first round, March 4, 5, 6 for second round. In the meantime, just a piece, and we really didn't get into it all, but it's listed here. There's a pre-screening process that will take place in between our applicant session closing. Our staff will go through a series of questions with them. The idea being we'll record them, we'll give you the transcripts to them, and to do a pre-screener. And so that we can go back and leverage that data we got from our surveys and the focus groups and say, hey, are we hitting the marks here from our pre-screener? We'll bring that information and data forward to you so you can see the full results of you have all the candidate applicant information, backgrounds, references, all that good stuff. We'll bring our recommendation, what we found through the pre-screener, as you make that final determination. So we'll bring all that stuff to you when we come back to it looks like our February 9th meeting for consideration. So I just wanted to point that out because we didn't talk about pre-screening, but it's another piece we're going to put in the middle of all that too.
All right.
So the pre-screening, is that where you talk about the proper certifications, citizenship, background checks, things like that, or does that come later?
That'll happen as they apply. So as they apply, we're going to be screening to make sure they have proper licenses and doing those informal background checks, if you will. When I'm talking pre-screener, I'm literally talking about we're going to schedule a time for them to Zoom with us and to do a virtual meeting where we're asking them a set of questions to which is going to hone in on the specific skill sets to make sure we're getting information to you folks to select the exact candidates that you want to see and hear from. So it really takes that on paper one step further, so we get to hear from them and view the transcripts about how they replied to a set of questions. And again, we'll decide that question set a little bit later on in the process as well.
Well, it's a great call out because that is different than last time as well, because last time we were presented a spreadsheet of the screening interviews that were performed and just some notes of why they didn't get invited. And this is, they will have Zoom calls. And if you as a board member want to drill in and watch a screening interview or, get access to all of the submitted packet, it's available to you. So so are you going to record them? I thought we were going to.
We were going to record specifically for at least audios who could read the transcripts.
Yep. So, Jeanette, sorry.
No worries. Just a logistics thing, and maybe this isn't even important, but March 4th is the quarterly meeting for the Intercity Student Council.
Right.
So just a heads up that if that needs to get rescheduled or whatever.
I understand. Andrew, do you have a question? Okay, sorry. It went up. That's all. Yeah, so I really, it feels okay because they're just little dates on a page right now, but February is gonna hurt. Because whenever you see closed session, they did a great job of scheduling those on meeting days, but those meetings are gonna be long. So it's long meeting, 3 meetings in a row, so it's gonna be a lot of our time and effort. So go on a vacation before and come back fresh and stay healthy, yeah.
Yeah, we'll do our best for front load as much as we can through, like, we
Right.
got through a lot tonight, which is something I probably would have spilled into probably 2 different meetings, but I wanted to front load. So, well, one, we're quick on time right now between surveys and our focus groups. And then 2, so we can, be gentle on those other closed session meeting nights as well.
All right, is there anything else? Lynn?
First of all, thank you so much, but I have to ask you, will you please tell us how to pronounce your last name?
Just how it's spelled.
Seven.
Malcheski.
Malcheski.
Malcheski, yep, Malcheski.
Malcheski.
Malcheski, perfect.
All right,
Now spelling it will be next week's test, or next time we get together.
Right.
That'll be a screener question.
before I call for adjournment, I want to thank you both for coming here and being well prepared. I really appreciate the amount of work we're able to get through because you're ready for us. I appreciate that a lot. So having reached the end of our agenda, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Need a
Second.
second? All in favor? We are
Aye.
adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
You have been watching the Green Bay Area Public School District's Board of Education meeting. Please visit the school district's website, www.gbaps.org, for more information on the district and future meeting dates. If you cannot fully access the information on this video, please let us know the accessibility issue you are having by calling 920-448-2025 or by email at communications@gbaps.org. We will try to provide the information to you in an alternative format and/or make the necessary improvements to make the information accessible.